think the easiest way, I'll let you each kind of just start, introduce yourself. So why don't you get started first?
Welcome, I'm Bart from Menkveld. I work at Cisco as a system engineer, where I help customers with basically everything data center related. So big data, analytics, software-defined networking, and everything which is related to that.
Spenser, so I look after the end-user computing practice, the technical practice for EMEA, for VMware. So anything end-user computing horizon view. You may have noticed that we bought a mobile company recently as well, so that kind of comes under me as well. Also around our horizon products itself, technical delivery, and also from the pre-sale side of things. Been around for about 7 years with VMware.
Great, thanks, Spenser. Tony Parkinson, run the server and storage solutions group for Dell here in EMEA. So that covers anything with the data center flavor, but clearly also have responsibility for our core alliance partners, VMware, of course, and Nexenta. So delighted to be here and look forward to a good session.
Thank you. I'm Tom Flaherty from Arista Networks. I run sales for Benelux and the Nordic region. Been with Arista almost 6 years now, and happy to be here.
So we've got quite the spread there. So we've got obviously from the virtualization side into some more networking and some of the traditional server or indoor networking side of guys. So what do you guys we'll go through each one. What do you see? What is software defined? What does that really mean to you? Spence, why don't you start?
I thought you'd start with me. So I'm going to give you a bit of an end-user computing bias here, because that's my speciality. I've been doing this stuff for far too long. So give you a bit of... 7 years, right? So actually, I used to work for a bank. I used to run a support desk originally. That's my background. And I kind of came across to a small little software deployment company, and we were bought by Symantec. And I left and come to VMware. And actually, when I first came to VMware, I thought, because I've been doing desktop for ages, like my life was desktop, 10 years of desktop. And we got into virtualization. Thought I was going to be dealing with data center, and within the space of about 7 months, this thing called VDI came around. And you should have seen the amount of people that came up to me and said, "You know desktop, don't you, Spenser?" And I'm kind of thinking to myself, I've been doing this for far too long, I want to get out of desktop. But actually, it's come a lot more around, and now it's key. So back to your point around software defined. For us, it's really about abstracting out the underlying complexity of the infrastructure. So to give it the spin on VDI specifically, I think somebody mentioned software, storage being the biggest inhibitor to VDI. Anybody heard of it's the year of VDI? I've been hearing that for I think it was kind of before as well, right? So, storage was the biggest inhibitor. 60% on average is the cost of storage for a typical VDI project. So for us, it's key that software defined is about lowering the complexity underneath. Our stuff on top, the bit where the users access, they don't really care what goes on underneath. We want to make this stuff easier for our customers. We want to make it a better experience for our own users that connect through this. But we just want to lower the complexity, and we want to abstract that away and lower the cost.
So for you, software defined anything is really all about separating out the hardware side of things and making it easier. So then you go to the hardware guys. We'll start with you. Where do you? How's that change for you?
So I step back a bit and look at the context of what we're seeing. I think we're in the virtualization era. I know we're focused here today on what's happening in the data center and SDX, but I step back and look at where are the opportunities for all of us in this room. It's really just not only within the IT industry, but you think about what's happening in the auto industry, the virtualization, Internet of Things. The opportunity is far broader, and I think in terms of how we view it, how Dell views it, is that abstraction between the hardware and the software layer. For us, it equates to, and it has to equate to better value for our customers. If it doesn't, then we're all wasting our time. And I think the other piece for Dell is, going forward, that it gives our customers choice. All right, it doesn't lock them into any proprietary environments that they're in, but we still have a long way to go in terms of, if we want to break away from that lock-in, then we've got to have resiliency, standards, interoperability. So we can't just all go in scattered 25 different directions. So, we're involved in all the different groups and standards. And to me, it's a terrific opportunity, but more for our customers on how can they improve their business, how can meet their pain points at a lower cost point, to your point.
So how about for Cisco? How's that changed for you? I mean, you've got both the server and the networking side to deal with then.
Well, I'm a system engineer, so I start with the technology side. Well, what is software-defined? If you look at our compute, basically we thought of the software-defined bare metal platform by putting an abstraction between all the configuration and your physical iron, because iron is just iron. In the networking part, it gets difficult. I mean, we have some people say, put a virtual network on top of your existing network, and that's SDN. Other people say, well, take a directive approach and tell every switch exactly what it has to do. Could be. OpenFlow is that kind of way. Or it is about programming your infrastructure, telling it what you would like it to do, and making its capabilities available to your application landscape. That's the part which I think has the most future. So how does this translate to business? Speed of business, speed of doing business. In the end, people don't want to wait for infrastructure. People want to focus on their application and want to focus on making money, because that's what businesses are for, not for running IT. So that's what software-defined means for us, making all our capabilities available to the application where it matters most.
So how about for Arista? I mean, you're looking at a whole different space on SDN a lot of times.
I hate to say it, I agree with you.
That happens often on these things.
It's about simplifying, reducing complexity. You know, if I'm going to create a software-defined network and I add complexity, why would you do that? And to me, the metaphor we use a lot is wireless. You know, why did wireless controllers take off? Because I could program at a single point and push it out to tens, hundreds, maybe thousands of APs for mobility. The same thing, to me, holds true with software-defined network. Single point, push out to tens, hundreds, thousands of switches. But now the mobility is the application. The application needs to be able to move if it's a VM vMotion, or the application needs to be able to connect via whatever it needs. If it needs storage over here, if it needs storage over here, if my users are over there or on an iPad. So the reason we need software-defined is basically be able to configure at a single point and make life easier or deliver faster for everyone.
So you mentioned that the year of the VDI, but we've heard it's just about everyone's like it's software-defined this or software-defined. Yeah. What's that inhibitor though that's stopping the market from really saying this is the one thing we're doing? We're seeing it a lot of talk. We're seeing it pick up over time. But what are you guys seeing as an inhibitor that's stopping people from going just whole hog into software-defined something? Anyway.
Google do less with more, and you only come up with more with less. Google software-defined networking, and you will get as many, thousands of answers. Yep. So the problem is, it's a vague concept that everyone answers differently, but everyone wants to talk about it.
Yeah, I think we're seeing working with NSX, we do see that as the. We've seen the virtualization of the server platforms transform the server business as we know it. One less vendor out of the way. But we see with NSX the opportunity, once again, moving the underlying LAN architecture around is not as simple as moving a VM. If we can start to get there utilizing SDN, then that's a step forward for our customers. To your point, our customers what do they want to run? I want to roll out more services, more applications to compete with my products, not get wrapped around the axle of deploying a VM or I've got to move my VLANs around. That's tough. So, and I think that the definition around SDS on the storage side is far less defined than it was on SDN. All right, so I think we've still got a long ways to go on the storage side of the software-defined piece. A lot of it is just software on storage, which is okay. That works well, does the job, but we've got to make sure we have standards that as an industry we're working to, because the customer is going to have a heterogeneous environment. We'd all love them to run end-to-end Dell, but the reality is that customers have choice.
He doesn't want you to run end-to-end Dell.
So that's what we're seeing. So it's that interoperability. We have to work together as an industry, and I think we've still got a lot ways to go on that piece, but we're starting to get deployments now with NSX out there. That's starting to show the benefits, and we'll ramp from there.
Spenser, you started to say.
Yeah, so, what stopped VDI? It's, like I said before, it's been the biggest cost, right? So storage and the performance of it. So I'll give you a bit of a story. When I first started off, I went to a UK government customer, and when they was doing the sizing for storage for their VDI at the time, so this is 5 years ago, back in the early days, these people were considering Vista. Yeah. So they did some calculations and they needed like 1.8 petabytes, right? So funnily enough...
100 users.
Well, it's 10,000, but yeah, the TCO didn't quite stack up. So that's been really, if I'm honest with you, that and the fact that what I think the industry has done is they've kind of said the answer is VDI. Or the answer, this is, what's the question? And what I think...
Big game of Jeopardy.
Yeah, it's kind of like we come along, we talk about the benefits straight away, but we haven't really understood what the customers really need. And what I think truly is that actually from the end user computing space, it's a blended approach. So for us, the storage side of things is just the more performant, the quicker, the less complex. The fact we can reduce the overall portion of what it takes to roll out an end user computing project, that's actually what our customers want. They like VDI, they like that concept of the security aspects of remote connections, etc. But it's just been the cost and the performance side. So what I'm seeing in the last 2-3 years is emergence of Flash, the fact that companies like yourself, so by the way, not this, I was paid for this, but I actually run Nexenta Community Edition at home on my VMware
so you
lab.
Didn't pay us for it either.
Yeah, you can pay me later on, right? So, but that's the thing, it's complexity side of things, and it's been the biggest inhibitor. And now we're seeing that finally start to become below 50-40% and get a lot less, and I think that's going to really help the adoption of VDI as being quite mainstream.
So simplicity seems to be a big theme on that. I mean, you come from a more technical side on that. So how much are you seeing that simplicity is coming along now?
If we, take again, look again at UCS, the simplified way of doing things is one of the main success factors. And that's also when I talk about software-defined networking, a lot of people perceive it as a problem looking for a solution. And there are real problems in networking, I won't disagree with that, but having a broad term like SDN is faking the thing. Like you said, it's not clearly what you mean by it, so you can't measure takeoff if you don't know what you're talking about. So that's why I rather talk about real solutions. Is your problem complexity? Is it automation? Let's focus on that. And there we see real takeoff.
So one of the things
steer away from the buzzwords. That's basically
stay away from the that's difficult sometimes.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So when I asked last time, was that where's that vertical really take off? And like so, we got a lot of service providers in the room. I mean, that's a spot for all of you. I know it's a good spot, but are there verticals that you're seeing that software defined is making a difference for, and that's a spot that you're really seeing somebody really wants to adopt?
Well, the service provider is, of course, the first sector we see things taking off, because it's one of the few sectors where IT is core business. I mean, for most enterprise customers, it's a mission-critical asset, absolutely, but it's not their core business. So people want their mission-critical assets to be stable, and they don't want to be upfront. And in the end, in the service provider and cloud business, it is their mission-critical, it's also their core business. So they want to move upfront because every leading-edge technology is a business differentiator for them. So that's, in that space, the most forefront sector.
So that's the first one you're really seeing on.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of times, we used to see a lot of education and the research was doing a lot. It seems like service providers in this space are coming kind of quicker before the education and research. Are you guys seeing any other verticals?
Certainly from Dell's perspective, we're seeing, as you said, the customers who have the capabilities to do their own thing. They've got their core business that they've got to run, but their traditional, you look at the banking sector, who's their biggest competitors? We're seeing PayPal. How can I use my legacy architecture to compete with PayPal? I can't. Right, so we're seeing terrific Hadoop, for example, this whole big data. I call it mixed data because that's the challenge. It's really how do I manage my mixed data coming through. So we're seeing it more in the large customer sets who have those capabilities to go and look at open source and look at these architectures. They've still got to keep their traditional architectures going, but this migration there is seeing there. We're seeing also now, we've won our first Microsoft Spaces deals coming through, first vSAN deals. So, we span, a huge gambit of the market. So, it's similar. Hosters, they're starting to demand this. The other one we're seeing is CCTV video surveillance. Enormous need for cold, cheap, and deep. We call it cheap and deep storage, right? Crude, harsh, but that's really what it is.
What it is.
So we're seeing that
those sorts of deployments happening as we speak.
See, I think of it more at cloud scale. And I think what you said, how do the banks compete with PayPal? And there's really now trickle down is coming from Google and Microsoft and these giant cloud titans. How do I compete with them? But how do I deliver as fast as they can? You know, our typical enterprise delivers a new software, a new product in 6 to 9 months, where the cloud scale, on a good day, the cloud scale guys, you know, they're losing $1 million a day if they can't deliver. And so they want to deliver in 3 days, in 4 days. But it's how do I provision, how do I manage, and that's where the software definition comes from. And it's trickling down now from what we say, you know, the cloud titans to the enterprise. And it's I want to do what they do because I want to be able to compete. And if I can't do what they do, I cannot compete.
So again, now it's agility with the simplicity. Yet you mentioned that you're seeing the companies that have the technology and the ability to do it, but then the statement before is it needs to be simple. So how are you blending those two?
Yeah, I think, you know, there's certainly looking at, you know, common management tools. You know, I don't want my guys spending time deploying a server. Right, that should be automated. How do we do orchestration? All right, and how does it, you know, can I use my traditional environment, my traditional applications? In many cases, no, they can't. You would never run Hadoop on a traditional SAN. It just makes no sense, you know, financially or from a performance perspective. So, you know, we're certainly seeing a lot of connections between, you know, a data warehouse. Data warehouses typically are not very good at ingesting large amounts of data. So wouldn't it make sense to maybe have Hadoop sitting next to your HANA appliance or having it next to your parallel data warehouse appliance and let Hadoop do what it does best, is just consume enormous amounts of data faster than anything on the market at the moment. So that's what we're seeing is, you know, how can we get those connections? And that's where software plays a part, is that, you know, you can coexist, right? Because they can't move that proprietary architecture. You know, they still have regulatory controls that some of these other new players maybe don't have. So it's this transition, right? They have to do it. There's no question if they want to stay in business. That's what they've told us, that this is a top priority for them. And they do see this software-defined construct helping them in that piece. So it's a coexistence. It's, you know, revolutionary to our customers doesn't sound very nice. Evolutionary, that sounds good. But, you know, there's disruptors in the market, both from a technology provider perspective, but also in various industries. So it's a dynamic that we have to address.
So I think we each have a space within that SDX paradigm that we've worked with. But to get to a full software-defined enterprise, there's got to be that mesh between storage and the networking and the compute side of things. What's going to help the end user and the consumer get from, okay, the first step, I have a traditional infrastructure. Okay, maybe I should go into SDN, or I should go, VMware obviously has taken a big step on getting the compute side there. But now, what's that next step, and how do I make the transition into the software-defined network or into storage, or what's your guys' take on that? What's that next step?
Well, I think the first step every enterprise has to take is not on one of the physical or software layers in an enterprise. It's on the people layer. As long as I go to a lot of customers and they still are very siloed, storage doesn't talk to compute, doesn't talk to networking, doesn't talk to anyone. As long as that stays in place, like that status quo, if we cannot solve that problem, software-defined whatever isn't going anywhere. We need to break those binaries and make sure people are start to work together to build a solution customers actually can use. And that's an organization problem which we as IT industry have to address. And we have to help people solve them by showing the way. Our Cisco on Cisco program shows customer how we do it. I mean, we're a vendor, but we're also a big IT user.
You got to run your shop too.
Yeah, we have 50,000 employees. We have a lot of IT and also a lot of legacy, like all customers. But how we manage that, and that's the big challenge, layer 8.
Yeah, agreed. The people and process thing, it's by far and away the biggest inhibitor we see when we go out there. We talk to lots of customers and they love the idea, but they've got these traditional silos, like you say, and it's not just the silos between actually the underlying storage networking and then server guys, it's between the desktop guys and the server guys as well, right? So from the VDI perspective, it's even more of a challenge trying to get these guys...
Especially when you get the storage tied in there.
Well, so...
There's never one like
desktop guys don't want to do storage,
no.
But at the same time, if they don't tell the storage guys how desktop storage works, then you won't get proper desktop storage. But the people and process thing, and it's automation. It's making sure you can do this stuff repeatably, you can monitor it, and you can show back what's going on and then show the cost of that as well.
I think that's why we're seeing that growth with DevOps now that we talked earlier. I mean, the automation is key for that.
Exactly, but it's people and process. It's changing the way that we used to do things and making our customers understand that you're going to have to evolve your IT guys as much as your infrastructure to make use of this new software-defined enterprise.
So you walk in every day, have to say, you need to go to SDN now.
I mean, hearing this, the key to us is open. So we believe heavily in open source, but we believe everything needs to be open and everything needs to be replaceable. So I need to be able to replace my x86, I need to replace my switch, I need to replace my software, I need to be able to replace my controller without changing everything. And I think that's really important. And that is what we're going to see. So I don't think it's necessarily the commoditization of hardware. I think it's actually the interaction of all the companies by open standards.
We have any questions out here from the audience coming up yet? See if we can get you a mic. I think it's coming. Slowly. She's weaving her way through the crowd. They just part the ways for you, don't they?
Thank you. I've actually two questions, if I may.
Can you introduce yourself real quick first?
Huip Claessens from Westcon Group, responsible for data centers. So actually a very practical question and a very high-level question, if I may. So from a practical point of view, what's really the difference, or how do you position your unique selling point for Nexenta storage on a VDI project? So what's really into it to make it work? So that's a practical question, and a high-level question is Nexenta already part of the ecosystem from Cisco ACI point of view?
Well, so, okay, for me, I was expecting them for you guys more. But so I think, do you want to take on the VDI section? I can take it.
Well, you take the lead in terms of the integration that we've got, right?
Sure,
and then I'll help you out there.
So we've done quite a bit of integration specifically around VDI and how we can help with the View product specifically. Being able to utilize the inherence of ZFS and the cache capabilities, bringing it local, getting rid of the latency, pulling latency, and bringing VDI close to the storage. The storage, the desktops, everything in one spot is immediately going to accelerate your VDI deployment. By doing that, you're also dropping the cost, dropping the complexity. So a lot of that really ties into play and gets you a lot more flexibility for VDI.
So this got multiple strands, and I'll give you a bit of history here. So in the early days, you had persistent, non-persistent. We don't really call it that now, but everyone still calls that in the industry. It's floating or dedicated is what we try to do, or change the terminology. But what we ended up getting is this whole phenomenon where people were doing local storage because the cost of SANs was so enormous. To do local storage, what you wanted to then do is offer this concept of non-persistent or stateless desktop, right? So this whole concept of the OS is just, you can spin it up just like that, you stream your apps in, you separate the user layer out, you get this concept where if a server host dies, you don't have to worry about vMotion, you don't have to worry about a SAN at the back end because actually you can get in and you can get your apps back in and you're pretty much up and running. What I think happens now is that now you've got these kind of cheaper solutions that give you the performance, but also give you the ability to do protection. So vMotion now at a virtual storage layer now, it means that we can actually mix non-persistent in the old terms and persistent workloads. So when you're designing for VDI, now you don't have to go in and try and spend ages trying to get your OS so optimal, all your apps virtualized. because nobody will ever get to the point where all their apps can be virtualized. Nobody will get to the point where they can have a VDI instance that is so optimized. You want to mix the workloads. And I think what was going on is because of the inherent cost of storage, everyone was going down this way of making VDI work. What it now means is actually you can run blended approach. You can have your high-end CAM users. You can have your lower-end, media task workers or whatever you want to call them, knowledge workers. You don't have to go down a route that if you do it this way, it's the best way of operating it. What actually it means is you're denying the flexibility that I think a lot of users want. I don't know if that was that too much for?
Kind of, thank you.
Yeah.
So on your question on Cisco, the same thing comes into play. I mean, we've worked with Cisco quite a bit around the Connect product with that. I mean, there's reference architectures out there. And there is that tight relationship both with Cisco, with Dell. I mean, we've worked across the board to make sure that in that VDI space, you can get an appliance to drop in there. It was talked about how does Nexenta go from being it's this software-defined thing to an appliance to drop into place. And when you look at being able to use a C240 or a 720 from Dell, and it's this many users, and you can drop in and have the flexibility and quickly just scale out that way, that's where Connect came into play, and that's where we have that relationship with Cisco on it.
And to go specific on the ACI part, well, we opened up basically everything about ACI. And it's free for all to integrate if you want. I don't know what they're doing in San Jose. They're not telling me everything, unfortunately. So I don't know if there are official integrations yet. But it's free to open. We opened up our southbound API with Opflex. So if you want to integrate and it gives you business value, go ahead. We're happy to support you. No limitations on that part. Which is, I must admit, quite a change for us. But I'm happy we made a change.
Going back to the discussion of open.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the only way forward. I mean.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience so far? All these guys up here and nothing? You got like 130 years worth of experience up here.
I know we're in front of your lunch, but.
So as we go into software defined, there's obviously, you deal with every other vendors. How are you finding you're blending your software defined strategy with some of these other ones? Flexibility is the key for that enterprise and for the end user with software defined. They can say, I want this vendor, I want this vendor, this vendor. How are you finding your ecosystems are growing or changing in the software defined model?
Well, they're growing for us. I mean, I'm meeting with F5 right now, which used to be a big competitor. Palo Alto Networks, one of our biggest competitors in the security space, is a partner in our data center offering. Why? Because we opened up our southbound API in a declarative way. We don't tell a firewall how it should firewall a packet. No, we say to a firewall, please firewall this network or this application group. And if you use Palo Alto, because it gives you value, okay. We say to Palo Alto, firewall this. If you want to use our products, of course, we tell them in the same way, please do this. And that's how our ecosystem is growing. It's open. We tell the functions what they should do, but not how they do it. And that's why I think we have a great story there.
How about you guys? How's it changing the ecosystem?
We're seeing certainly on the storage side, in terms of our roadmap development, it's bifurcating. We've got performance optimized storage. Obviously, the cost of flash is dramatically reducing, but also how are you utilizing flash through working with the software teams is really changing that. And then we're seeing, the cost optimized storage growth just exploding. The traditional SAN-based storage that we've all known and loved for the last 10 or 15 years.
Love's a strong term.
Yeah,
we have a love-hate relationship.
In reality, we're seeing that shrinking. All right, so in terms of our roadmap, obviously very strong. We're seeing these workloads move closer and closer to the server because that's where the fastest bus speeds are. We just launched a new server with 6 terabytes of memory. And also we're continuing to see even traditional rotating media continue to increase. Seagate's announced a 6 terabyte drive. So, we still have to recognize that people have got to back this stuff up. That's still a challenge, right? That need doesn't go away. The resiliency, all of the constructs that made us SAN successful, we can't say to the customer, well, forget all that stuff, but it's a lower cost. So, we're not going to compromise on that. And we're certainly seeing that the growth in both sectors. Then, how do you move the data around, from a tiering perspective? How can you incorporate the server into that tiering, T0, whatever construct you want to put in there, we have that offering as well. So, how do we leverage the power of the Moore's law in the server world? Storage is keeping up pretty well as well, plus the dynamics of very smart software on hardware. I think the hardware guys get a pretty bum rap in terms of, oh, that's commodity stuff.
It's just bent metal.
Yeah, but you still have to have very robust, reliable underlying storage architectures, not just great software sitting on it.
How's it impacting? I mean, you're coming from a networking side, so your ecosystem has to change every time you talk about software-defined anything.
Well, so we had to open up our API, and so we have a common interface, so we talk to all the controllers, and so I don't care what controller you use. And we were, actually our software architecture, I think we were pretty lucky. I don't think anyone 10 years ago started creating our operating system thinking software-defined networking would take off. I mean, but the fact is, I mean, we were always software controllable. And about 4 or 5 years ago, we started this thing, zero-touch provisioning, where we would provision new switches without keystrokes. And so is that software-defined networking? Kind of. But it was basically a way to use common tools, DHCP, Chef, Puppet, and configure. And then, so we're really a benefactor of this craze. I think we were a little lucky.
Sometimes it's better to be lucky than
good. And so I love it. And but it's really about working with, as you said, F5, Palo Alto, working with the companies that you work with today, and interacting and making sure you can deliver the services. And that was just all about open.
So if you guys were at the end user, you're at maybe a reseller out there, what would be the first thing that you would recommend to a customer on their path, other than obviously getting the people, because you can't fix the company all the time. You can't walk in and be like, you can't have silos of people anymore. You can't have a storage team. You can't have a networking team. How do you show them? How do you show them what the benefit of going software-defined is?
Well, like I said at the start, the benefit is your speed of doing business. IT companies, IT departments spend more than 70% of their budget on keeping lights on. That's not adding value. So focus on bringing that down. We can do that by moving things to the cloud. You can do that by automating them away. A lot of things. Bring that down and focus on what is actually bringing money to your company, how you can add value as IT. So that's what the first thing I would say. Focus on bringing your OPEX down.
Anybody else?
I'll make your life easier. I'll make your day-to-day job easier by allowing...
Does that work? You just walk in, I'm going to make your life easier.
Yeah, actually.
And they just sign a PO?
Well, I have to show them how.
So mobility is probably one of the other things that has helped change the industry. I mean, everybody wants to be able to use their iPad or their Android or their phone.
Or their Dell client tablet.
Or their Dell tablet. Sure.
No fruit discussion.
Of course.
And their BlackBerry.
Some.
Who uses the, really? How has that changed? I mean, you mentioned AirWatch and things. How is the mobility side changing how you're helping a company move into that software-defined model?
Well, there's a couple of things to the mobility side. I mean, we've always had a strategy of anything we do from the desktop side, we should be able to access that across multiple devices. I think if we go back 2-3 years ago, we had this concept of that you don't need MDM. Everything's about the apps and the users, right? So we don't want to control the devices. But the reality of the situation is actually you do. You need a blended approach. There is no right or wrong, right? So from the mobility side, the AirWatch acquisition is key for us. You will see more and more integration of those guys. Clearly, they're just newly on board right now, but you'll start to see a lot more definition in terms of that strategy of what's going on. There's some big things going on today, later on, that you may have seen already that's going to happen around this. So I can't steal the thunder there because people above and beyond my pay grade will be delivering that good news. But
we're not streaming. It's okay.
Sorry?
We're not streaming. It's okay.
Yeah, you'll see more on that side of things later on. But yeah, it's key. Mobility is key for us. It's always been key for us. The only difference is now is how do we get the challenge of those applications that were designed to work on a Windows operating system onto a device? Okay, so ultimately you want to redesign the applications, make sure that they work on a software-defined infrastructure. That's the key thing here, and then deliver it out to the users. But we're in this in-between stage where we've got legacy applications that just aren't really designed to work on a mobile platform. So our job, I guess, from the end-user computing side is taking what people used to do, making sure that actually you can deliver that mobile, but also in the desktop. The desktop's not going to disappear. No,
still a healthy business for us.
We still got...
Yeah, no, it is. I'm saying the desktop business, obviously, XP, we say adieu to XP this week, and that whole transformation, does impact on the data center. So we're seeing terrific growth in new usage models. How do these devices impact my life? We're talking to CMOs more often than we've ever spoken to before. Traditionally, we haven't spoken to CMOs before, but with the explosion of the data and the competitive nature, we launch a product, we get 1 million tweets. That's great, but how do I do analytics on that? And then, once you've done that, but you've got to do that real time. A tweet has a pretty short half-life, and good, bad, and indifferent. How do we manage that from a social media perspective while still managing my traditional sources of data, SQL, DB2, and Oracle, which is not going away? So we're definitely seeing on the mobility side, the growth in these new form factors, fat tablets, thin tablets, and the VDI discussion. I think on the VDI there was a natural assumption that the only market for VDI was thin client type devices. We're seeing a lot of fat devices. For
tablet is what people want to use now.
Yeah, workstations, but not holding information. Security is a big driver as well.
Chubby devices, I like to call them.
Yes, chubby. Yes.
Not really fat.
So one of the big things is always going to be security, right? So the good news here, I'm carrying half the company's information around on my mobile device. That's great.
Also the bad thing.
Yeah, and I'm going to a foreign country. How do you control identity management that's country-based? So if something worst case happens, I leave it behind. Then our IT department can kill that device. So this whole you can't do it without the discussion around security. And that includes firewalling, et cetera, et cetera. So, we're really looking at this whole piece really end-to-end and how it intersects all the different new technologies that are coming out.
So as we're kind of wrapping up, are there any more questions out there? So I got one more for him. Nothing even from Tarkin?
Come on, guys.
No. Actually, another question, but maybe, is this microphone working? No, thank you. Another question, maybe.
You had something to say.
It's more like a statement, and maybe you can comment on it. Actually, as Nexenta, the reason we put this panel together with you, one of the largest desktop virtualization implementations, we just actually finalized the first phase, right, Michael, in India with Wipro. And by the way, as an open company, as Donna and Simon talked about, we're very open. We share our customer names, and in most of these events, people are hush-hush, don't share. We are confident about our solution with our partners, with Dell, with Arista, Cisco, VMware. Let's be frank, Citrix was also involved. One of the biggest...
They were invited.
No, but one of the biggest ever VDI deployments at Wipro.
Yeah.
It's going to go up to 140,000 VMs. There's some AirWatch mobility, obviously, implementation. I know Maurizio is very excited about that as well, out of Europe, as well as Michael and Marius. Obviously, Arista is involved, Cisco is involved. So maybe, Michael, you can touch on that. And from a customer perspective, desktop virtualization, mobile virtualization, we're seeing increasing big deals now. In the past, 10,000, 15,000 desktops. Now we're talking about hundreds of thousands of desktops. Maybe you can have a quick wrap-up conversation about customer implementations that we're seeing as Nexenta from store's perspective, but more from our partners' perspective.
Yeah, I know. We're definitely seeing that it's, as that scale grows, at scale, it's a whole different ballgame. I mean, everyone can do 100 users of VDI. That pilot of 100 users, if they can't figure that out, they're doing something completely wrong. And it has happened. But we're seeing at that scale that it makes a difference. And it changes the way that you're architecting. That you need that capability, the simplicity, the automation. I mean, how has that scale changed the way you guys approach VDI in situations like this with Wipro?
Well, VDI is not exactly my specialty, but if you look at scale in general, it's something which is a lot of time overlooked. People do a proof of concept with whatever, for example, software-defined networking, and in proof of concept, it's great. But like you said, everybody can pull off that 100 VDI seat proof of concept. Just like everybody can do a 3-switch or a 5 virtual machine proof of concept with any SDN. But try it at scale. And you have to factor your real scale in when you do a proof of concept. So without going to VDI, because like I said, it's not my expertise.
So just that scale, I mean, you're starting to see larger deployments.
Everything. I mean, if I take I'll build a simple network. 20 servers in a rack, 5 VMs on each server. 100 VMs, 10 racks. I have 1,000 VMs now. And every top of rack switch hits another switch. Now I have 1,000 VMs and multiple paths. Now I have 2,000 paths, 3,000 paths, 4,000 paths. And that's just a simple network. You know, an RFP came out earlier this year for 660,000 servers running VMs. How do you manage that? So, you know, we're gonna split the network, underlay, and it's gonna be simple. 660,000 servers times however many VMs, and that's gonna be simple. Scale's changed everything.
And some of the Googles, the Facebooks have definitely made a big difference on that, on learning the scale. And those, how are you seeing it from Dell on the scale side?
I think some of the deployments we're seeing, we're working on at the moment, it's relatively small in terms of the number of nodes, but the actual, it's a workstation node, so it's a very chubby workstation. But then for our teams, so we have to have people who can have a knowledge from what's the client impact, what's the back-end impact, what's the security impact. So the challenge for our teams, and certainly the acquisitions we made with Wise, opens up the opportunity for us. But from a skilling and training perspective, VDI is quite complex at the back end, right? And there's lots of choices. So the good news is that SDS does give a lot of choice in terms of what's the right storage architecture that you're going to put in place. But by definition, that also can increase the time to quote for those sorts of architectures, because the customers are now aware, well, what if I do a hybrid array? What if I do an all-flash array? What if I just do cheap and deep? So we're starting to see different architectures coming through based on different workload models. So the scale, of course, is always the big challenge, because it's not just scaling the servers or the VMs, it's what's the underlying architecture.
It's also scaling the people.
The people,
the knowledge.
The knowledge base, and you're right, the proof of concepts we can now simulate tens of thousands of nodes. So we used to do that a long, long time ago, but those are the types of opportunities. And the usage models, though, are really interesting. It's VDI, the overhead for VDI used to be almost twice the price, the same cost as the device. So that overhead is, to your comment, is reduced dramatically. Now it's opening up the eyes for a lot of different use models. So I think that's not only the large scale, that's interesting, but it's also the specific bespoke use cases that are also very, very critical for customers. The one we're working on, it's 700 engineers in one of the automotive organizations. At the moment, each engineer works on his part of the vehicle on his individual workstation. Pretty easy to put a little thumb drive in there and put it in the pocket.
And walk away.
And walk away.
Again, security comes into play. So.
Yeah, so that's a big piece for us.
Well, Spence, I think you get the last word on scale, and then we got to wrap it up here so we can move on.
Yeah, so I think what's happened over the last 2-3 years is we're moving from departmental implementations of VDI to actually this could be something that could work for most of the company.
To actually enterprise.
Yeah, and there's been a couple of things. So there's a cost of it's been going down in those, storage is cut down in cost. Licensing from other companies hasn't really changed, right? Mentioning no names. So that's been an inhibitor, but I think also as well, there's been a bit of a nuclear arms race, I call it, between ourselves and another large company beginning with C and ending with X, which I think is really good for the industry, because actually what you've seen is innovation around VDI that if we didn't have two big companies fighting it out, then you just wouldn't get that. So all those little corner case scenarios that couldn't be addressed with VDI have now changed. So you mentioned the CAD-CAM one. When I first heard about 3D graphics and VDI, I'm sure it was a load of techie guys wanted to play Crysis 2 at home, right? So I couldn't see the use case, but you know what? I'm probably talking to this automotive company right now, and that is a real big use case. Little things like unified comms. Unified comms, I used to call it kryptonite for VDI, right? So never the twain would meet. That now is just passé, everyone does that. So
should just work.
Yeah, it's the case of that this stuff now actually can work for pretty much every use case. And because of that, people are scaling up massively. Coupled with that, when it starts to scale, people are seeing the complexity, hence the whole need for DAS. So people are saying, you know, getting past a certain point, well, why should I look after that? I'll give it to somebody else to do it. So the scale is going to them. But I think the other thing as well is VDI is great, but what if it goes wrong? No, clearly nothing ever goes wrong with VMware stuff, right? But if I used to come from a help desk.
That's okay.
Well, yeah.
Nexenta Connect has a backup for it, so we'll take care of that when yours messes up.
We've abstracted that away, but if it does go wrong, how do you fault find that? The help desk person, first line support in the old days of a desktop, what did he do? That's where I started off, right? I used to go down there, unplug the network cable, go into DOS, do a quick DIR, make the user look like I knew what I was doing, reboot the machine, and it might work, right? But that's gone wrong. You know, that doesn't happen now. It's like, is it the storage? Is it networking? Is it the thin client? Is it the vSphere layer? You know, what's the deal? So I think with scale, it's not just how can we deal with it infrastructure-wise, it's how do we actually manage and automate that and monitor it? How can we fix it if it goes wrong? So what you should be seeing, and you know, clearly VMware are doing something about this, is it's not just sorting that bit out. We've got to make sure we can actually run this stuff.
Well, great, guys. Thanks for joining me up here today. I think, Monica, or Tarkan, you got the logistics?
Let me quick wrap it up. Thank you so much for the great panel.